Hi, this is Seth at Truth from Earth. A few nights ago, Ron Mortensson was speaking at an illegal immigration roundtable event hosted by Utah governor candidate Phil Lyman. Ron spent nearly the first half of that entire event giving a speech of some kind, and it got really weird really fast. He launched into this tirade, making a whole lot of accusations against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, insisting that church leaders have been abetting and playing a serious role in promoting illegal immigration in the state of Utah. And he made a lot of false claims, which I'm going to go through and debunk one by one. Now, we do have an illegal immigration problem in the state of Utah. Utah's current governor, Spencer Cox, has definitely been abetting that problem and refusing to act adequately on it, as has the legislature. And they are the ones who are the policymakers and the executive branch officials who are responsible for implementing these policies. So if you want to find out if something's not going right and you have a complaint, lodge it there, right? But anyway, Ron Mortensson went on this really weird rant against the church. Little background on him. Ron Mortensson was nominated by President-elect Donald Trump to a top post in the State Department overseeing refugee issues, which might be a possible euphemism in this case for illegal immigration, but refugees in general. And so I would expect him to have some awareness on this topic, right? Anyway, he did go into a fair number of facts and documented things pertaining to the legislature in the state of Utah and the governor's office. But I'm just going to touch on his allegations against the church specifically, because that was weird and it was uncalled for. So I'm just going to jump right in here. These are all timestamped from the video. I'll include a link to it in the description so that you can review it. So first he says, okay, the church was looking at increasing the number of its converts in the 90s and so on. It was becoming a worldwide church, right? And he made this claim that they're more concerned about their standing in the world now and not doing or caring as much about what is good for the state of Utah. This is a red herring. It's an assumption of or an imputation of intent. He's trying to mind read and say, oh, you don't actually care about what's good for Utah. You don't do what's good for Utah anymore. That's a complete non sequitur. That has nothing to, like, the fact of the church becoming, a worldwide church does not in any way imply that church leaders are no longer doing things that are in the best interest of the people in the state of Utah. Okay. So just get that one out of the way. Now, there have been illegal immigrants who have been baptized, been taught by missionaries and baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As far as I can tell, there is no current policy forbidding that. However, these people were here at the invitation of, in some cases, of, people in our government, and yet they're here illegally. So the real core question here of, the church baptizing people who are illegal immigrants is, do illegal immigrants have religious freedom? Yes or no, right? And the answer from the Constitution is a resounding yes. So Ron Mortensson seems to be arguing that they don't or shouldn't, or that respecting religious freedom of illegal immigrants is somehow abetting illegal immigration. But just even on its face, this is an empty argument. And once you recognize that, it's the religious freedom that is at stake here, not any kind of, church putting its thumb on the scales of policy to try to entice people to come here. It's just simple religious freedom. You're going to see this theme again and again with Ron Mortensson's accusations here. So he goes on to say Elder Ballard sent a letter, 2008, I think, could be mistaken on the timing here. Elder Ballard sent a letter with other church leaders distributed on the floor of the House saying, please do not rescind in-state tuition for illegal immigrants, undocumented, right? That was what Ron Mortensson alleged, only that is not what Elder Ballard said. From a Deseret News article in 2008, it says, while the LDS Church has taken no position on the bill itself, Elder Marlon K. Jensen of the 70 had recently called on legislators to take a more thoughtful, factual, not to mention humane approach. And Elder Russell M. Ballard, that should be M. Russell Ballard, of the Quorum of the 12, is among the members of the Alliance for Unity who signed a statement opposing HB 241, right? And so the allegation against this bill is that the legislators needed to take a more thoughtful factual, and humane approach, right? So this implies that, church leaders who may have been speaking out against this were not just being like, hey, we want benefits for illegal immigrants. Their criticism was rather pointed in the direction of saying, we need to be more thoughtful, we need to be more factual. This implies factual errors in the legislation that was being proposed, right? So that's a completely separate issue from, giving disproportionate or special favor benefits to illegal immigrants. So if there are factual issues, we should address those specifically. And Ron gets curiously non-specific with a lot of these claims, right? Okay, another quote from that same Deseret News article. There's a governor's spokesperson who says, we just need to see the legislation in its final form, right? So if you're not seeing it in its final form, you don't know what's even in it. Like, it's kind of hard to say, oh, you're for or against it, and you're just speaking from a position of principles, right? Another advocate said, I would want to see what the substitute looks like. The devil is in the details sometimes, right? And this is something we have to realize about legislation. It rarely / never actually accomplishes what it claims to on the surface. And people can have legitimate, concerns with implementation details while not necessarily opposing what the bill claims to implement, right? So you're going to see this again and again in these complaints. So all of these, by the way, are perfectly legitimate criticisms for a new bill that purports to undo or to replace something. So, if you need to get more factual, etc., go ahead and do that. Anyway, Ron says that they did this a couple of times. But yeah, until he gets more specific on that as to what those exact things were that they were affirming, then it's just frankly misdirection to insist that they were promoting, unfair favors or whatever for illegal immigrants, because that's not what they said, and that's not what the record says here. So he mentioned just kind of off the cuff that like the president of Mexico came in and tried to influence policy. That seemed like a red herring, just totally irrelevant, just thrown in. If I'm mistaken about that, Ron, feel free to correct me. Feel free to fill in details that you didn't. I understand you were just kind of throwing out a lot of stuff there. But please be specific if you're going to make these kinds of claims, right? He goes on to say, in 2005, the church had Senator Bennett amend an agriculture bill in a way that it shielded churches from prosecution for knowingly allowing illegal aliens to be ministers or do volunteer work in a religious organization. Okay, I've got to break this to you, Ron. This is simple religious freedom. There is no incentive whatsoever for illegal immigrants to cross a border just so they can be ministers and give volunteer service in a religious organization. The church did not offer illegal immigrants paid labor or benefits of any kind. So it's just kind of like, woohoo, you're here. We might as well teach you the gospel. And as long as you're here, why not serve your neighbor? Why not? Can you come up with a good reason, Ron, why we should not be teaching people who are here illegally and offering them opportunities to give unpaid volunteer service to their neighbors? If you can come up with one, I'm happy to hear it. But that's your bait and switch here, is you're claiming that they're abetting illegal immigration by simply upholding religious tolerance and granting them freedom to serve where they're at, okay? Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, these illegals, many of them are here at the invitation of our own government. And yeah, they're here illegally, but if they want to serve and make their communities better, are you wanting to put a stop to that? So that's a non sequitur. This is a religious freedom issue right here, not abetting illegal immigration in the slightest. Okay. He goes on. Ron says, in 2008, a member of the 70 downplayed the seriousness of illegal immigration when he said undocumented status is akin, in a way, to a civil trespass. It's just a civil trespass, he says. There's no big deal in it. Okay, so the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not a law enforcement agency. We don't have any authority whatsoever to go and prosecute people for being here illegally. So for church policy purposes, let me just say this. The written laws on the books can be what they are. There are a lot of laws on the books that are not enforced, and if law enforcement decides they're not going to enforce something, that's up to them. That's their call, right? It's not something the church gets involved in, right? This is plain as day. And the church can create its policies around whatever, and if something's unenforced, hey, we're waiting on you, federal government, to figure out what you're going to do about this, right? And to a lesser extent, the state government. And so whatever policy the church takes can be, informed in some degree by the fact of inaction on the part of the governments, on the part of the executive officers of government. If they're just sitting on their hands about something, then it's like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do with you? I know. Let's teach you the gospel and let's give you assignments to serve, right? How about that? So again, this criticism just doesn't hold water. It's the church is not a law enforcement organization, so for all purposes, this criticism is just immaterial. So Ron goes on. He says in 2010, the church supported the Utah Compact, which was really generated by the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. And the church didn't ever come out and fully embrace it, but they made it well known that they supported the compact and that the compact conflated and the compact conflated illegal immigrants and legal immigrants. Okay, so again, this is just vanilla misdirection again, because he's saying the church kind of supported it, but not really and not officially, and just you got to be specific. What specific principles, what specific claims did any church spokesperson make on this subject? And it's just to make it super clear here too, like the bar is set extremely low for this criticism because he says the compact conflated illegal immigrants and legal immigrants. That's extremely easy to do. All you have to do is just say immigrants. Okay, and if you have any policy or any statement or any reference that just says immigrants, well, guess what? That quote conflates illegal immigrants and legal immigrants. It could be doing so in an innocuous context. I don't know. I have not read this one myself. But in any case, you got to be more specific than that. You're just setting the bar way too low here and just being like, oh yeah, they kind of more or less-ish supported it maybe. And so yeah, there could have been church spokespersons who say, yeah, we're in favor of XYZ. We like these principles, etc. And then somewhere in this document is this thing that just says immigrants, right? Way low bar. Be more specific, dude. Okay, he goes on to say in 2011, they... who are they? Is this sincere question, Ron? Are you wanting us to conflate the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or its leadership with lawmakers, right? Because the they in this context means lawmakers, right? They're not the same. I can attest to that. I'll tell you more on that in a second. Just want to burn through these things right here. So in 2011, the legislature, passed HB 116, and that was giving legal status to illegal immigrants. Chris Herod spoke about this, supposedly what the church did and so on. He claimed home teachers were pushing to vote for that bill, one of the most open things that was done behind closed doors. All segments of what Ron was saying about this, saying the church was kind of open about promoting this bill. But here's what the church statements actually say on this subject. They say, as a matter of policy, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints discourages its members from entering any country without legal documentation and from deliberately overstaying legal travel visas. Here's another quote. This is just a warning. Like they speak in terms of principles, and people can interpret them as they may, right? But again, this whole thing of like, oh, they support such and such, like so much of that is imputed and really without evidence. But so the history, you got to go into the details of what they're actually saying. So the history, going back to the quote, of mass expulsion or mistreatment of individuals or families is cause for concern, especially where race, culture, or religion are involved. The church has experience with this. This should give pause to any policy that contemplates targeting any one group, particularly if that group comes mostly from one heritage. So this could be seen as a statement on the current immigration policy, right? Is, the church has experience being expelled on account of their, religious background and so on. So they're just urging caution on this because it's really, really easy for this stuff to go wrong. And of course, you can misinterpret that and can misconstrue that in a way to say, oh, they're in favor of illegal immigration, which that's not the case. Just so flat out. Okay. So yeah, they affirmed the Church of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their official spokespersons, affirmed the responsibility of nations to secure their own borders. So that's the nation's responsibility. It's not the church's responsibility. If the nation isn't doing their responsibility, the church can't pick up the slack. And yeah, so again, support for one aspect of legislation or certain policy in a certain circumstance does not equate to endorsement or support for unlawful behavior. So yeah, again, misdirection on what the bill says and the specific items the church actually gave its support for. This is one of the oldest political tricks in the book, by the way. Say, create some bill that's like, oh, we want, see if this one rings a bell. We want to help equality in marriage. We want to help promote, people who are planning to be parents or whatever. And then if you don't support that bill, then you must not actually want to be in support of that principle. Anyway, Just classic vanilla textbook misdirection going on here. Okay, so, and I said I would give an example of this in particular, but so Ron is basically doing the same thing that nearly all enemies of the church in political matters do. An example is the church came out in favor of amendments that added religious freedom protections to the proposed Respect for Marriage Act. And a lot of people went around on the internet saying, oh, look, the church is supporting same-sex marriage. That's not the case at all, because they did support certain amendments to the bill, right? So Ron and everybody else who's critiquing the church on any of these topics, you've got to be hyper-specific and say, what did they actually affirm? What did they actually endorse? What did they actually support? I mean, and especially with all this garbage of you have to pass the bill in order to know what's even in it. Like, I'm sorry, but like you liked or disliked this piece of legislation for whatever specific critique or principles or reasons, or even just because you didn't feel good about it, really does not just neatly equate to, oh, you're pro illegal immigration or whatnot, right? Because that's just standard, anti the church, anti decency, anti respect for other people tactics right there. So, all right, I'm gonna go on. And I understand people can try to interpret it this way, but please get specific. And as you do, you'll find out that superficial interpretation really doesn't hold water. Okay, so yeah, there are a lot of reasons to support or not support a particular bill. There are a lot of things that people just are in the habit of misrepresenting the church on, and Ron is running. He's just running straight into that. Okay, so yeah, the church doesn't support sodomy, plain as print, and yeah, the same thing's going on here. It's just trying to turn it back around. I'm going to go to the next quote from Ron. He says, Dieter Uchtdorf in 2012 is reported, this is in the Salt Lake Tribune. I looked up this article, and the Salt Lake Tribune does say this. It says, President Barack Obama's outline for immigration reform matches the values of the Mormon faith. And, that sounds awful. It sounds terrible on the surface. But if you actually read that statement, then President Uchtdorf, from him, then a different story emerges. So this is from the article, I quote, he just said, in this value process, we need to stand together and make sure the United States is still a place where people can come, and once they come, not to feel fear, and do it, of course, in a lawful way. So that's what President Uchtdorf told the Salt Lake Tribune in a brief interview per this article. He was talking about his principles, and what he said was totally in line with our values. So yeah, if Barack Obama gives an outline that's based on principles, and you say, yeah, I can point to those principles and I can say that's in agreement with our values, that's a completely different thing from saying this particular policy really embodies those values well, right? I mean, Barack Obama has said some amazing, very quotable things about like the needfulness to have fathers in the home and intact families and stuff like that. And he's said some really great stuff. That doesn't mean we endorse the policies, guys. So just like, and this is what politicians do. They'll make really nice promises, and then all they need is a few poison pills to get some bad stuff implemented, and it causes a lot of contention and confusion, frankly, because the policy as implemented does not match their nice sounding, frankly, usually they try to appeal more to people's principles when they're pitching it, right? And when they're running on a campaign to get elected or whatever. So we got to differentiate there. And I can say that I think the same thing as Elder Uchtdorf said on some occasions with respect to quotes from Barack Obama. We should probably get used to doing that so that we can differentiate principle from personality, right? I can point to things where I'm like, yeah, I agree with this thing that Barack Obama said. Yeah, that's a principled statement. Doesn't mean that he's necessarily a principled guy. Doesn't mean that the policies that these guys make are all just totally hunky-dory, right? Big differences. So yeah, interpreting this to mean that that Elder Uchtdorf was using the church's doctrines or position to affirm illegal immigration is just frankly ludicrous. So any sensible person can agree that there should be a pathway to legal citizenship, and it should be adequately accessible for all who will uphold the Constitution. I don't think this should be controversial, right? And that is simply what they're saying. Like, you can't find a first presidency statement endorsing or abetting illegal immigration because such a statement simply does not exist. So Ron Mortensson then goes on. He brings up this topic of identity theft. And again, that's not the church's prerogative to deal with. So like, if you want to make some weird accusation on that, I mean, that's just out of line. he does bring up one good point. I think this is his strongest point, right? He talks about BYU, Brigham Young University, and he says that they have a web page that is devoted to undocumented immigrants and helping them out with whatever processes and stuff that they deal with, right? And so, but frankly, like this argument, if you want to make the argument that because BYU does it, that is therefore endorsed by the church, I'm sorry, but like maybe you haven't been paying attention to recent events. But, you know, I can share with you a video clip of a BYU professor tearing up the First Presidency and Quorum of the Twelve's proclamation on the family proclamation, this seminal doctrine that's been released and approved and totally 100% official, and you can find BYU professors ripping that stuff to shreds, right? And so the fact that there's this very heavy, frankly, woke infiltration into BYU's staff and faculty and some of their administrative decisions that run, you know, very obviously counter to the doctrines and the instructions, the teachings of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12. Like, I'm with you there. I'm like, I agree that we have a woke problem at BYU. I don't agree that anything that goes down at BYU, including on its official webpage, is necessarily, you know, an official view or endorsed by the church, because that's clearly not the case, right? We've got some serious disconnects there. We do need to clean house at BYU. You know, the First Presidency has been urging and imploring the administrators and faculty at BYU to get in line. And I don't disagree. I mean, there's some serious house cleaning that needs to happen there. But we already know that, right? On other issues that are, you know, very pressing as well. So, I mean, if you want to make that argument, go ahead and try to make that argument. It's a non sequitur to say that the church therefore supports it, right? I wanted to say one more thing about, you know, if somebody claims that, oh, it's Utah and Utah is run by Mormons, right? And therefore they control whatever happens in government. I mean, I can handily refute that with personal experience from my own life. In 2018, as a Utah resident, I heard that the church had issued public statements on what was then called Proposition 2. So 2018, Proposition 2, it was supposed to legalize medical marijuana, right? And the church is concerned about this. So they commissioned a legal analysis by a law firm, and then they went and they published the results of that legal analysis for all to see. And they urged people to vote against this proposition because the church's official teachings include the word of wisdom, which teaches against addictive substances. Marijuana is a known addictive substance. So I got involved in this. I had feet on the ground. I went and I interviewed people. I talked with people about it, made sure they were aware of what's going on. And you know what? A very large percentage of the people I talked to were actually in favor of Proposition 2 passing because it provided a path towards recreational marijuana use. And that was one of the things that the church warned us about. And you know what happened? The people of the state of Utah voted to support the proposition, right? So the notion that just because the church leaders say something, even if it's doctrinal and whatever, and urge us to go vote for or against something, the notion that that's going to happen, I'm sorry, but that's just a pipe dream. That's long past, you know. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you know, membership is not dominant in Utah anymore, and active membership isn't, certainly by a long shot. So the notion that the church somehow controls Utah politics is just completely bogus. They do speak in favor of principles, and especially the rights of families and religious freedom. So, and you know what? Nobody is a bigger fan of the Constitution than we are, than members and the leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know this from my own experience. So again, like, yeah, if anybody's trying to weave that into an argument, just subtly kind of conflate the they, meaning the members of the church, right? You know, is that the game you're trying to play here? Say, oh, the legislature of the state of Utah did it, therefore the First Presidency of the church must have been on board with it. Complete non sequitur, dude. I mean, I get if that's not what you're saying, fine, but just don't ever even try to hint at that's what you're doing, right? Don't try to use that because it's a bad argument. And again, I have numerous examples I can have elsewhere on this channel of how the prophet has warned us against the things that are being done by our own government in the state of Utah. So yeah, again, the argument just doesn't fly. So yeah, in summary, Ron is just using Gish Gallup's strategy, consisting of misdirection to attack and militate against the leaders and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints over issues that are in reality the exclusive purview of the legislature, the executive branch, and the judiciary in the state of Utah and in the United States. So, like, we're standing up for religious freedom, and in the process of us standing up for religious freedom, this Ron guy, he's like, oh, you guys are abetting illegal immigration. Non sequitur. That does not follow. And again, just to recap, gonna wrap up. But yeah, President-elect Donald Trump nominated Ron Mortensson to the State Department overseeing refugee issues, right? So yeah, if you want to oversee refugee issues, like, and if you take any issue what I've said here, might have said something imperfectly or whatever, but the principles are true, they're valid, they're correct. Ron Mortensson, feel free to reach out. But I would also just say, like, you're not helping us eliminate illegal immigration by pushing false narratives like this one. Like, just cut it out. And yeah. And Phil Lyman, you know, I'm very sympathetic to your fight against Utah's SB 54. I am super gung-ho about that. This past election was definitely tampered with in that regard. Spencer Cox did not comply with signature requirements, and there are a lot of powerful people who are, you know, trying to keep him in power. And I can guarantee you the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has indeed been speaking out against that corruption. And if members of the church had turned out in force to follow the prophet, Phil Lyman would not be our next governor. Right? I'm just telling you the plain and simple truth. And so if I were you, I would disavow people like Ron Mortensson and everything they're saying. I would distance yourself from their statements because you hosting him at your event as the featured guest speaker, and one of the first things he does is launch into this, you know, really long tirade against the church. You got egg on your face. You got to get it off. And, you know, I again, I really want your and pray for your petition to be granted against SB 54, because we need some serious election reform. But yeah, on immigration reform, I don't trust this guy Ron Mortensson. He's made a lot of, frankly, demonstrably false accusations against the church, and everybody should just wake up to that. So, all right, that's it for this one. Sorry it's gone long, but see you next time.